Good evening. Good evening, everybody. Please take your seats. Is that actually working? Was that working? Hi, everybody. If you could grab your seat, that would be really much appreciated. We've got a few more people arriving, so please find and grab a seat. Anywhere in the semicircle around, make yourself comfortable, and we will begin shortly. Thank you very much. Do it one more time. Welcome, everybody. Please try to find a seat. Grab yourself a seat. Make yourself comfortable. We'll begin very, very shortly. So please grab a seat, and we'll soon begin. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Nice to see you again. Thank you.
Good to see you as well. Yeah, see you every year.
ladies and gentlemen, please
We have a seat for
take
you
your
just over
seat.
here. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for everything today.
Always works, always. Thank you. Let's put it back. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Take a seat. We are starting very shortly. And first of all, of course, a very, very warm welcome to the 5th edition of the Nature Positive Dinner in Davos. Once again, in the beautiful space of the SDG tent, And once again, and you need to listen to this, once again, generously and graciously hosted by Rosalie and Andre Hoffman. And once again, organized by the fabulous Intent team. I think they should be crowned as the heroes of the SDG 10 program, because without them, all this wouldn't have happened. So thank you, Jean, thank you, Stephanie, and all the rest of the team. So my name is Marco Lambertini, Nature Positive Initiative. I have to say, by now, a few years in Davos, crazy. By now, Davos, non-Davos, we know there is no such a free dinner, right? But some dinners, I don't know if you don't understand what I mean, but some dinner, or maybe this dinner, you may feel is a bit even more expensive than the others. Because we have quite a few people that would love to say a few words on basically where we are on the journey to a nature-positive world. The journey so far. We're going to take stock, listening to an incredible set of leaders. Some of the logos of their organizations are here. That they will tell you where we are and what we are trying to do and what they are trying to do to bring the world to a point where we will be nature positive, more nature, no less. The evening is going to be a quick fire of short interventions. We'll hear for a very diverse group of people, but we're going to start, obviously, with the opening remarks, and I am absolutely delighted, Andre, to welcome you on stage for giving your welcome remarks first. And while Andre is coming to the stage, two things to say. First of all, if you want to amplify the messages of the dinner, hashtag Nature Positive, hashtag SDG 10, hashtag WEF 2024. And we was told that today, this is a bit of a tradition of a dinner. Every dinner we have a special food. One day we had fish tracked through blockchains, sustainable fish. This time we have a vegan steak, digitally 3D printed, that I was told tastes like heaven, and you can actually tweet what you think about it later using the hashtags.
So I don't know what heaven tastes like, but you're about to discover. Yeah. It's with a genuine sort of emotion that I'm standing in front of you now. This dinner started like a sort of illusion of thinking that perhaps you can bring people together who have the same agenda, which is always a very difficult thing to do, has become a little bit of an institution. And from where I stand, looking at this room where there's not one seat empty is, of course, a great, great joy. Thank you very much to all of us to have come here. Now, let me in opening remarks is such a difficult thing to do because you don't want to sort of talk about what other people are going to talk about, but I have a couple of things which are on my mind and which I would like to share. The idea that, we're talking about nature positive. For many, many years, humanity has looked at nature as something that you consume as a resource in order to create the prosperity that humanity always seeks. We need to find a way of creating sustainable, inclusive prosperity because we only have one nature and we are over-consuming it. I mean, that is absolutely obvious and we all know that. The question is, how do we do it? And trying to find a practical way of putting nature into the societal game is something we've been spending a lot of time thinking. And the people in this room have all a little bit of the solution. We just need to put it together and make sure that together we can improve the state of the planet. So I happen to have a dual past. I mean, I've spent a lot of time with NGOs. I used to be, as you probably remember, vice chair of WWF. But I also am vice chair of our family company. And I'm very grateful that the chairman of our company is with us here tonight. Thank you, Selvin, for being here. The fact that I have these two streaks of being able to look at business and being able to look at the scientific base of nature, has led to a very simple conclusion. We're all in the same boat. We need to do it together. And so nature as a force for good by opposition as business as a force for good by opposition as business as a separate entity which does make money and then give it from time to time back to nature when they think about it. I think we really need to have a symbiotic relationship. And that's very much what Nature Positive is about. How can we quantify nature? How can we include it? How can we measure the impact we, humanity, have on the social, the human, and the natural capital? I mean, the best way to protect the Amazon is to solve some of the inequalities. There is a link between nature, social, and human. Human individuals have to be able to understand how important their behavior is on the system. So today, we will have this fast-moving evening where lots of people are going to talk about what they do. Please take home most of these messages. Make sure that you put it into a system that sort of works for you, but do something. We are in the last streak. There are things happening around us which should really worry us. Johan will tell us where we stand in terms of planetary limits. And so I will not risk myself to say something about it, especially in his presence. But there is a real necessity for all of us to stop thinking that this is somebody else's problem. It's our problem, each of us individually and in society. Voilà, this is a couple of remarks I wanted to make. I hope you will still have a nice evening. I know that the program we prepared for you is really very exciting. And you will see the meat does taste like heaven. I don't know what heaven tastes like, but you will tell us afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, André. The next speaker doesn't need introduction because it's me. I introduced myself already. Save time. And I'm going to just add a few words about the Nature Positive Initiative for anybody that is new to that, by saying that exactly 1 year ago, we were here in the same tent, and several of you were with me here, celebrating the adoption of the Global Biodiversity Framework. And we had very good reasons for celebrating, because first of all, it was a very hard-fought fight, very uncertain, very close to the end of the negotiations, but particularly because the GBF is undoubtedly the most ambitious, the most comprehensive, and most measurable plan for nature the world ever adopted. 30% protection on land, fresh water, and ocean, 30% restoration of degraded ecosystem, $500 billion of harmful subsidies for nature, phased out, eliminated, or redirected, 200 billion per year on nature finance, and the list goes on. Fantastic. And the mission of the GBF, giving the world for the first time a global goal for nature comparable to the below 2 degrees, now 1.5, that is the global goal for climate. Halt and reverse nature loss by 2030. Halt and reverse is not net zero, like emissions for climate. It's net positive biodiversity, because nature can come back, can recover if given a chance. That's a big change, because having a global goal for nature, having a way to compare our action, moves us from guesswork to science-based targets, moves us from doing what we can or do something for nature, which is what we've done for the last several decades, to do what's necessary to bend the curve of biodiversity loss, to achieve a genuine nature-positive outcome. However, André mentioned it, the next speaker is going to dive into it, I have to mention it as well. However, like my grandmother was telling me when I was a boy, it's a very Italian thing, you cannot hide behind the finger. Of course, you need to use this finger, yeah? And it's true, because what's happening is terrifying. Planetary tipping points are dangerously approaching. The 1.5 target is increasingly elusive. Even a nature-positive goal that we are all celebrating here feels very far away. We are still embracing an economic model that is undermining, is destroying, is eroding the very foundation, its very foundation. The health and stability of our system, of ecosystems, nature's resources, nature services, we all depend on. But of course, in this picture, it's pretty terrifying, and we need to always, I think, mention it and remember, because there is no room for complacency. There is also a lot of change happening in the right direction. First of all, I would say science. Science has never been clearer, both about the impacts, but also about, particularly importantly, the consequences that the loss of nature is having. And that has triggered a different perception of nature loss, primarily related initially to a moral duty to coexist with the amazing diversity of life on the planet. And this is, I feel very strongly, but personally, I'm sure all of you in the room feel the same, super important dimension. But now, the issue has gone beyond that. Now, nature loss is becoming to be perceived as a threat to the stability and the health of our economy, of our society, of our health, of our well-being. It's becoming a security issue for humanity. And it's becoming an issue that also is undermining progress on some of the most important challenges of our society: water security, food security, health, malnutrition, et cetera, et cetera. So all this is moving in that direction, and we're in Davos, and the business case, the economic case for nature conservation is equally recognized like never before. The dependencies, the impacts, the risk, the costs to our economy, to business profitability, sustainability, resilience, perception, reputation, are all understood and acknowledged like never before. And that has brought nature higher in the political, corporate, and societal agenda, I really think, like never before again. It's something super exciting, but we need to translate all this science, all this awareness into true action, and not just action in a vacuum, action at the scale and the speed that is required. And that's why we have, of course, the symptom of all this awareness is the GBF itself. The world would not have agreed if this perception wasn't there, the sense of urgency wasn't there. But also, many initiatives that has been developing, and we'll hear about today, are trying very hard to contribute to speed up and scale up. Because we know what to do. We need to conserve more, restore more. We need to transition key economic sectors from nature negative of today to nature positive of tomorrow. And we need to realign the whole financial system to support this transition. We know what to do. But we need to do it at scale and fast. And that's what's missing today. Because speed and scale is going to define success or failure in this endeavor. Today, we are hosting as a Nature Positive initiative. This is not a new initiative. In fact, this is an initiative of initiatives already existing. And many organizations in this slide are the members of the NPI. They are all the core members. They are come together with particularly a particular approach. First of all, is a mix of the global environmental conservation organizations, sustainable business platforms. We have basically all the main sustainability standard setting organizations, indigenous knowledge, local governance, and more, academia. But they're coming together to align on two things mainly. The first one, to preserve the integrity of the concept of nature positive. At a time when nature positive is used as a buzzword, not necessarily as a goal. Secondly, to align on guidance on how to deliver genuine nature positive outcomes. And to work together in defining that guidance for corporate, for investors, for society at large. Because, and I'm going to repeat it again, it's super important for me, nature positive is a nice, seductive word, but actually is not a slogan. It's a measurable global goal. It means net positive biodiversity. It means more nature, not less. A different approach to our economy, to our society, to our consumption and production. So, thank you for coming tonight. Thank you very much again. And now we're going to enter into the real set of the program. Thank you. And let me then call onto stage, that one really needs no introductions, Johan Rockström. Johan Rockström is, of course, the director of Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact and Research. And Johan, you were here on the first edition of the dinner. Yeah, come over onto stage. And you're still here, so it's fantastic. Fantastic to have you here with us again. So please.
Thank you so much, Marco, and it's great to be here. And I must start with perhaps an apology, because what I decided to do, given the fact that we are, after all, among friends here, is to give you an Earth System Scientist testimonial anno 2024. And I must admit that personally, this is a moment in my professional life that there's never been reason for so much concern as the situation today. We are losing it. The window to a safe and just future for humanity on Earth is rapidly closing. We have, as you know, overwhelming evidence that we're entering the 6th mass extinction of species. It's an existential threat. The last time this happened was 55 million years ago when we lost the dinosaurs on planet Earth. We have overwhelming evidence that if we transgress 1.5, which is a physical limit, we are likely to trigger 5 big tipping points and impact livelihoods for billions of people on planet Earth. 2 of these tipping points are the Greenland ice sheet and the West Antarctic ice sheet, 10 meters sea level rise, which of course would eradicate nations across the world. And still, on aggregate, we see no progress. We've been talking about this decisive decade, our last decade to turn around, since the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement, were adopted in 2015. Now we are halfway into this very decisive decade, and we're still driving our overpowered world economic combustion engine straight towards the escarpment. When we entered this decade, we needed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions with 6 to 7% per year to have a 50% chance of holding the 1.5 degree physical limit. That's the carbon law. Bend the global curve of emissions by 2020, cut emissions by 2030, continue doing it down to a net zero world economy by 2050. That's what science has been saying soon for 20 years. Now in January 2024, the number, as we've calculated, is up to 9.5%. Globally, we must, if we are serious about the Dubai Agreement, we have to reduce emissions by 9.5% per year from now onwards to have a chance of cutting emissions by 2030. There's no evidence that that is possible without totally bulldozing down the global economy, which nobody wants to do. So, dear friends, we are in real trouble. The latest scientific assessment shows that 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries are breached, of which 4 of them are deep into the red. This is the message which I find to be the most important one to humanity. We're deep into the climate crisis. It is costing human lives and the economy right as we speak, but we're at that point where you need a healthy planet more than ever, losing the resilience and buffering capacity of planet Earth. We're seeing cracks in the ability to handle this crisis. So even if we can find evidence that it's possible to keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius window open, it will, and that was our message in Dubai, inevitably mean overshoot. Inevitably mean overshoot. We are likely to crash through 1.5 between 2030 and 2035. So the 1.48 we've experienced this year is a super El Nino. It's a human amplified El Nino event. So we will probably go down slightly in the next few years. But then, unfortunately, the climate forcing will not allow us to avoid going through 1.5 within the next 10 years. And then, at best, having 30, 40 years of overshoot that can take us to 1.6 to 1.8 before coming back to 1.5 by the end of this century. Dear friends, this means that we're in for a rough ride. It means that we have a gauntlet in front of us. The big question, of course, that nobody scientifically can answer is what does 1.7 to 1.8 imply? Well, one thing we know for certain is that it will mean more extreme events, more suffering, and more impacts for the most vulnerable people in the world. It means, dear friends, that we will be looking back at 2023, the extremest of extremes ever observed, as an harmonious year. The trouble is, what happens with the tipping points? We do not know. There's only one scientific paper published showing that there is a chance that we can still hold off the major irreversible changes, but the science and jury is still out there. This is very, very risky business. This is something we really need to communicate and start acting upon, the urgency that we actually are facing. We do not know if this gauntlet can be managed, but we know that we have to buckle up. And this is the message to humanity. In a world where we gather here in Davos, and the only threat we can talk about this week is war, war, and war, and some misinformation as well. In this darkness, nature is our true light. All models in science are clear. The only chance of bringing us back after the overshoot is nature. Ultimately, it's healthy oceans, healthy ecosystems on land that can keep the carbon sinks, the carbon stocks, and the heat intact. That's a very optimistic assumption, but it's in all the climate models, the assumption that we will succeed with the nature positive transition. This is why nature positive is our most promising bet. Invest all our efforts to build resilience in nature, generating more genetic diversity, more ecological functions, more ecosystem services for human development. And the messages, which Marco pointed out, we know how to do this. We know how to scale, and we know that these investments give win-win outputs for safety and for justice. So, dear friends, we have such a big task in front of us. Nature positive is our only chance for a stable future for humanity on Earth, and we really need to get the action going across the world to have any chance of a future. And of course, this gathering is fundamental to get the momentum. And I'm really apologizing if this sends a negative injection into this, but I'm really serious about that's the state of knowledge today. Thank you very much.
No complacency, no complacency. Thank you, Johan. Thank you very much for that blunt but factual presentation of the state of affairs. Right, my pleasure now to invite another incredible guest of tonight is Inger Anderson. Inger Anderson is Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Program. And so, Inger, please come on stage. She's been a hero of the GBF with many other of her colleagues, and it's a pleasure to have you again with us, Inger. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very, very much. And to Andre, of course, who is our host and enabler of this, a big, big thank you for what you do and how you have continued. I was here at the first dinner back in the day, and it is a great pleasure to be here right now. And I think what we've heard before is indeed, yes, we are in dire straits. And nature is a bit of a lifeboat. And what you are all here because you know that, you understand that, and you have been part of constructing this lifeboat. Talking about it is obviously not going to do it, but I think what we are seeing, and this is what I'd like to sort of emphasize, is that nature has now walked into the climate COP unequivocally. That's a good thing. And nature, of course, is on the agenda for desertification as well as for CBD, that goes without saying. And the goals that we got, as you painted, Marco, are wide and ambitious and important. And yes, everybody was going 30 by 30, but we got a lot of other stuff, which you know. But I think that when we talk about, for example, the planetary boundaries, as Johan just did, let's understand then that we also need to deal with nutrient flows. And anyway, nutrient flow is a climate contributor. And so there are significant issues here that all hang together as we seek to deal with this. So the goals under the CBD are not just inside the box on biodiversity, they are broad and wide. In UNEP, as you may know, we speak about the triple planetary crisis, a crisis of climate change, which I think everybody has well understood, but also the crisis of biodiversity and nature loss, desertification, and everything else that goes with it. And of course, the crisis of pollution and waste, including plastic, which I'm giving a jolly good push while I'm here. And which is, by the way, also mentioned in the GBF in a direct way. So we saw at the global stocktake in the COP in Dubai that there was an emphasis on obviously what we're seeing is that there is an emphasis on nature playing a solution role, but it's probably useful for us to remember these 5 horsemen of the apocalypse as far as biodiversity is concerned, which are, of course, the IPBES drivers of loss. Yes, climate, but also pollution, also fragmentation, overexploitation, and invasives. And if we are to step into this space of biodiversity, we need to be aware of each of these 5. And that is, of course, what the targets in the CBD seeks to capture. But there is an enormous role for private sector in this space. And I think Andre put it very simply, but this is just not, we have to find, and industries and companies that are here today are very much aware of this, of course, but we understand that over half of the GDP, from agriculture to so much more, is actually depending on nature and the services that nature provides us, the bounty of the rains that will come because of the way that the miracle of photosynthesis, the incredible nature, the incredible services that nature provides, not just the usual, we always say the food we eat, the water we drink, yada, 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 but much, much more than that, the purification of our earth as we toxify it. And so understanding these interdependencies and working on them and the impacts, positive impacts that business can have is critical. That's, by the way, target 15, in case you were wondering. But that is very important and something that we want to see. So what is it then that private sector can do? Well, obviously, step up on Paris, because as you just heard from Johan, and now we are finally phasing out the stuff that's causing the problem. I mean, I would say it in a more polite way, but we're transitioning away from what is the cause of the problem. That we did after 28 years, and we skipped a year, so 29. Let's not get stuck there, but there is a real opportunity now, and we're seeing bankers and others saying, okay, now we have a clear signal, it's a time to begin to step back. But as we deal with this, and private sector particularly, there is legislation in place on sound chemical management. Chemicals is an impactor on climate, but also an impactor on biodiversity. Be sure that you are aligned with this. Yes, in the EU, that's easier because there's regulatory, but don't forget your export markets and what happens to them there, including the production. The DSI, digital sequencing information, is new, is difficult, is complex, but holds some answers. And again, pharmaceutical companies and others are invited to step into this. And as you know, the CBD has been having some discussion precisely on this to move it forward ahead of the next COP. And that becomes quite critical. We need to get this thing mobilized and established because we did not quite succeed on Nagoya, I would say, and there is a much more serious work to be done here. And the issue is that we understand that right now, yes, we are subsidizing fossil fuels, but we are also subsidizing nature negative. Be mindful of what those subsidies are and engage with them. Even if your company in the short term is benefiting from this, in the long term, we are significantly destroying our nature. And our subsidy bill is about 500 billion a year that are harmful to biodiversity. And it's 5 or 6 times more than the spending that we're actually pulling into biodiversity. So we have a lot to do. But we have a framework which is ambitious and which holds the whole, which also links into all the other treaties and conventions. Climate, yes, but also the chemical conventions and all the other biodiversity conventions. We need now to translate that into integrity and into accountability. And I think that we can very much count on those of you in the room and way beyond to help us move towards that climate neutral, nature positive, and pollution free world. Thank you very much.
Inger, thank you very much. The 3 crises, the 5 drivers. And let's hope that the plastic treaty, which is under negotiations now, will be as successful as the GBF and the High Seas Treaty and the other successes of the last few years. Thank you. Inger, so it's now my absolute pleasure to invite on stage Her Excellency Miss Susana Mohammed. She is the Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development of Colombia, and Colombia is going to be the host and the president, as you know, of COP16. So, Minister, please come on stage.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. We have to prepare something that many countries prepare in 2 years, in 8 months. So I'm here to ask you for all the support of all the nature community in the world and all the business community, but especially to bring in this very critical moment a COP on biodiversity that doesn't go through only like a process mechanism to discussing words and to try to get into fine tuning of declarations, but that allow us to send a very powerful message, as Mr. Rockstrom said, in this very critical emergency moment. Colombia decided to host this COP because we have been reflecting and living through our peace process signed in 2016. As part of the peace process, we have a special jurisdiction for peace where perpetrators of the war come, and if they tell the truth to the judges, they can have a special guaranteed transition justice process. As they have come to the transitional justice system, and in a very unique justice system in the world, victims can agree with the judges what do they want their perpetrators to pay as a reparation of the 60 years war. And something that has been quite unique is that communities, the most excluded, abandoned regions of Colombia, have come to the peace jurisdiction, and they have said to the judges that they want perpetrators to restore nature as a way of restoring peace. And they have said that because most of the victims come from the indigenous communities, come from the Black communities in some of the most biodiverse hotspots in the world, and as their relation with nature was disturbed by war, they want to recover the territory and their dialogue with that community and ancestral knowledge. So we want this COP to be the COP hosted in Colombia that brings this message to the world. Let's make peace with nature. And what does it mean to make peace with nature? It means to build civilization, society, and economy under environmental limits. Making peace with nature means understanding that we are part of that ecological process. Making peace with nature is not bringing nature as a commodity to the market, even if the product of that could restore nature, but is actually re-sacralizing nature and understanding that the power that we got as humanity, because we discovered how to put those fossil fuels as a driver of civilization, gave us the power to mobilize energy at a scale that no other species could, has actually created an economic system that sees nature as a resource rather than the source of life. So the invitation for this COP and all the discussions is actually to bring that sense of the spiritual in terms of our relationship with nature, and to realize that there is something beyond us that we cannot dominate or manage. Even the climate crisis is showing us what happened when, as part of this huge civilization process, we deregulate the forces of nature and allow them to go free into a transformation that, by the way, is transforming already the planet, the way we live, but especially the other sources of life. Making peace with nature is actually, as previous speaker was saying, realizing that if nature is able to adapt to this change that we unlock through fossil fuels, we will be better able to adapt. That other species are already finding the mechanisms to find a way to live in this changing planet, and that if we reconnect to that relationship, if we recognize those traditional cultures and those peoples that are at the base of that relationship with nature, we will also learn what it means to transit from the world we lived to the world we will be living. Because if nature is able to adapt, communities will be able to adapt as well. And finally, it means that then the voice of those people need to be heard, and the exchange of knowledge systems need to be heard, and that technical jargon that we have at COPs, but also that political discussion of power, real power and geostrategic discussions that we have to stop for a moment and listen to those people that are at the upfront of the nature relationship, but also of the climate crisis. And maybe in all, we will find some answers. And we hope to facilitate that space of meeting, of discovering, of urgency, and especially to give the people the central place at the COP. We want you really to be welcome to Colombia and welcome to the People's COP.
Wow. Well, Minister, thank you very much again for that absolutely amazing, inspiring, and I have to say, absolutely genuine intervention. I have to say, everybody, book quickly your hotel in Colombia because everybody wants to go there. So better, particularly if Minister does this speech more than once around the world, I'm sure you do. There will be a big competition. But again, thank you for coming. I know you've been arriving today and still you have been joining us for tonight. Thank you, Minister. Brilliant. Now it's my pleasure to hand over to Jen Medwick. Jen Medwick, the CEO, the Executive Director of the Global Common Alliance. Jane, where are you? Brilliant. Please come over onto stage. Jane is going to facilitate a quick fire panel that is going to help us understand a little bit where we stand in our journey towards anthroposophy, signposting some of the key initiatives that are helping us getting there. And I think that's it.
Thank you very much, Marco. Very proud to be here, happy to be here. My first time in Davos, a Davos virgin, if you like. So far, the experience is pretty good. So I'm here to discuss where we are now and where we're going with the Nature Positive Initiative, how the different pieces are coming together, how organisations are combining and aligning to make that bigger difference, to make that real step up that we've just heard is absolutely essential to really get going, as Johan said. And luckily, I've got a few friends and colleagues to help me, so I'd like to invite my panellists up to join me here. We have Tony Goldler, who's the Executive Director of TNFD. We have, so if you'd like to come and find your seat. Hi, Tony. We have my colleague, Erin Billman, who's the Executive Director of the Science Based Targets Network, part of GCA. And we have Johnny Hughes, who has a very long title, because he's CEO of WCMC and Senior Representative of UNEP WCMC. And we have David Craig, who told me that his kids call him a data geek, and that's the best introduction. But he is here actually as a member of the International Advisory Panel on Biodiversity Credits. He's also, as you know, co-chair of TNFD. Welcome, David. So before we go into a bit of a panel discussion, a brief history of where we are on this journey. So it's a short history. It started in 2019. A group of CEOs came together. I think they're probably all here, with the idea that there could and should be a similar time-bound goal for nature as the was by then for climate. There were lots of views on this, and a critical piece was actually bringing this all together, very disparate ideas into a common narrative that all of the organizations at that time could get behind and then go out and communicate, bring this notion into the public and get attention. And then Nature Positive started to appear everywhere, and it notably landed in the G7 statements. And all the organizations started to move forward. Then, of course, as we've heard, the Global Biodiversity Framework was a real landmark success, but only because of incredible collaboration within and between sectors. So within the conservation NGO sector, very unusual, really calling for the same, and also by the business sector pushing that through. And that's why we got that framework agreement. Nature Positive, perhaps in all but name. And the understanding, as has been mentioned, that, you know, I was going to say the medium to long term, but now perhaps I should say even in the short term, reversing the condition of nature and natural systems is not only a good thing into itself, but it's essential for everyone's future. But certainly in the medium term, the payback is very, very strong, particularly for those who are the most poor and vulnerable, and it's also good for business. So where are we now? There is a huge amount of work to bring synchronicity between the nature positive world and the climate world, in how it's communicated, but what lies behind that, how you act on this. And there's a proliferation of initiatives which is trying now to drive Nature Positive forward alongside Action for Climate. And of course, Nature Positive is not only essential for achieving those climate goals, but also for achieving a safe and just future in the, for example, food systems and the health system change. And you see this coming into the dialogue, and also central to reversing land degradation on a massive scale. So there are, well, they've gone, but there are 27 organizations come together initially, which is great. My personal opinion is it's great, but it's not nearly enough. Even though those 27 have quite enormous reach with all their own networks, we're still missing some key sectors there, development, humanitarian sectors, who have real weight and ability to push change as well. So there's work to do to enlarge it. The Global Commons Alliance that I represent, of course, provides a beautiful framework in terms of the Earth systems boundaries that the Earth Commission continues to develop, that gives a destination and a framework for Nature Positive. And our accountability accelerator, notably COP28, together with the climate champions, launched an accelerator tool that allows access to all the data and methods and organizations and guidance that are out there to enable action. So there is really a lot of activity happening, and I would say there's increasing harmony and alignment in really coming to agreement on how to take Nature Positive forward. As Marco said, we desperately need the metrics and the measurability to get behind the tools and guidance, and of course we need regulation to give it a push. So now let me talk to some of the key players who are acting on this. These are just, a very good selection to say how can we accelerate action at scale, and how is this going? I'm going to shimmy over here. If I can get this. Is this working? It is. Yes, good. So, Tony, if I may come to you first. Could you share your thoughts on how mobilizing the business community is going? Obviously, wasn't long ago the TNFD framework was launched, and there was an amazing announcement just yesterday evening about businesses coming on forward. So how do you see this going forward, and what challenges do you see as well?
Thanks, Jane. So maybe I can start by recapping the journey thus far. So if we go back a year ago when we were sitting here at this dinner 12 months ago, we were about halfway through developing the risk management and corporate disclosure framework. building on the work of TCFD, of course, on the climate side. We're delighted, 1 year later, that yesterday we announced that 320 organizations around the world from 46 countries have now signed on to start making disclosures on nature. Thank you. And that's only 4 months after the formal launch of the recommendations at the New York Stock Exchange in September. So let me just quickly profile the numbers to give you a sense of the group. So 320 organizations from 46 countries, 100 financial institutions, including 7 of the world's most systemically important banks. So that's 7 of 29. 98 companies from the MSCI 1500. And we've got representation from across all sectors. And it's an incredibly diverse group of companies. So we're really, really proud. At the TNFD, we have co-opted the bee as our mascot. And of course, these companies are bees in the sense that they recognize that nature is a source of prosperity, the pollinator. It's also a tremendous source of risk and is going to incur harm to companies that don't take this seriously. And that's the sting. And so we're very happy that we've started the hive. 320 is quite modest. The publicly listed companies are about $4 trillion in market cap. The asset owners and asset managers represent about $14 trillion. So it's a great start, but we're very, very conscious that this is a hive, a small hive. We're committed to turning up at COP16 in Columbia, Minnesota with a bigger group. So hopefully we can turn the hive into a swarm and arrive in Colombia with many more adopters of the TNFD framework. But we're off to a good start, but there's an awful long way to go. And to Johan's diagnosis, we cannot mobilize companies and financial institutions fast enough. But the goals are there. Target 15, as Inga mentioned, requires 196 governments to put in place requirements for corporate reporting. The tool is there, the TNFD framework, and now we're seeing the market step forward and start taking action. So a long way to go, but we're off to a good start this year.
So congratulations, Tony and team, for that. We've got momentum. We're moving, we're getting these companies to take the first steps. I'd like to then logically come to my colleague Erin Billman to talk about the Science-Based Targets Network and setting of targets and how that connects with that momentum and where we are in this and how you see this coming forward. Erin, thank you.
Great. I'd love to start with just a quick survey of the room. Raise your hand if you think getting a 55% on a test is a good score. I knew there were a lot of high achievers in Davos. So that gets you the #1 spot on the World Benchmarking Alliance's Nature Benchmark today. And I am very excited to see how that changes in the next year or two, both with the companies that have just committed to TNFD, as well as what we have at SBTN. So also looking back 1 year to last year's Nature Positive Dinner, a few of you might have seen that I was a little bit tense because we were pushing very hard to get the first version of corporate science-based targets for nature out the door, which we did last May. And we are underway with 17 global multinationals who are using it right now to set targets. So this is not committing to do it. They're doing it now, which is a really great compliment because while it's a much smaller number than 320, they're doing it now. And so we can look to those 320 for the next wave of adoption. So by mid-year this year, we are planning on opening up that version to all companies who are ready to engage on setting science-based targets. We're also going to be issuing finance sector guidance focused on how the corporate content might be useful for them directly, as well as how they can start asking the right science-based questions appropriate to their business in order to be able to drive demand for an uptake of what we're producing. And so just in terms of an immediate next step, if you're not already signed up for tomorrow's masterclass, we are doing a capability building session. Tony and I, Mark Goff, Capitals Coalition, Eva Zabi, Business for Nature. Come make sure you're up to speed on the latest on assess, commit, transform, and disclose so that you can be a change agent with companies yourself.
So this Science-Based Targets Network and its further development is really a collaborative effort. It's an astounding number of organisations and people who are really giving their time and their energy to move this forward at a pace that is possible, that is feasible and still ambitious. So congratulations to all. Which is a beautiful segue to my next speaker, because Johnny Hughes is one of the most active members of the SBTN Council, and WCMC is extremely important part of bringing this to being. So Johnny, can you let us know how WCMC is working in this space, and also perhaps connecting with governments and between governments and private sector to bring this together? Thanks.
Sure, thanks, Jane. And yeah, great to be here at the most important event in Davos. And I'd just also like to pay tribute to my colleagues here who have been working very closely with over the last couple of years, and it's been an absolute pleasure working with both SBTN and TNFD very closely. I've got 3 words, actually. Alignment, integrity, and support. I'm going to come to alignment first, because I do feel that successful delivery of the Global Biodiversity Framework will be dependent on a whole-of-society approach. Marco touched on this earlier. If state and non-state actors align behind the goals, the targets, including tracking and reporting the headline indicators of the framework, the effect could be transformational. If we don't do that, we're going to miss out on huge opportunities for really powerful collaborations at local, regional and international levels. So my first message is alignment. You know, we have an amazing framework. Let's work together in a whole-of-society approach to implement that framework. The good news is we've actually carried out a really interesting piece of work under a project that we're doing with the European Commission called Align. And we looked at the reporting frameworks, the disclosure frameworks, and this is happening. We are seeing the methodological approaches, the tools, the approaches that are being pioneered by my colleagues here coming together. So there is that alignment coming together, and I think that's a really positive trend. My second point is around integrity, and I think the way that we implement this is going to be absolutely crucial, and it needs to be done with a sense of urgency. You know, there's 6 years until 2030. 6 years until 2030. And just as the time window for action on climate is closing rapidly, the time window, and Johan mentioned this as well, the time window for action on addressing the biodiversity crisis is also closing rapidly. So if we're going to take this opportunity to significantly reduce the risk that ecosystem collapse will bring across the planet, we really need to act with urgency. What does this mean for business? For businesses, I think acting with urgency, yes, of course it means pulling together insightful data on your impacts and dependencies on nature for disclosure reporting through, for example, the TNFD. But it also means setting targets around that. So the next phase, once you've done your disclosure, is to go to SBTN and set those corporate targets. And most importantly, when that has been done, act. And you know, that step of action shouldn't be delayed because of disclosure and target setting process, but we really need to start that now. And my third message is around support. There is a lot of support and a lot of amazing people working in this space. And the mission statement of UNEP WCMC, which we adopted in 2022 actually, is that we develop knowledge and capacity for a nature-positive world. So it's in our mission statement, it's in our DNA. We're doing this through working in partnership with many in this room and beyond. For example, the Secretariat, we provide the Secretariat to the Biodiversity Indicators Partnership, where we convene over 70 organizations to promote and coordinate the development and delivery of biodiversity indicators, all of which, of course, are aligned with the Global Biodiversity Framework. And this year, we're also launching a national monitoring support initiative supported by the German Climate Fund, ICI, where we will work together with national and regional agencies to strengthen national monitoring, data management, and analysis. And I just mentioned one more thing that we're doing, which is developing Target Tracker, which is a tool to track and visualize ongoing progress towards each of the goals and the targets under the Global Biodiversity Framework. And we're doing that at national level as well as global level in a similar way that we already do for Protected Planet. And many of you will be familiar with the Protected Planet report, which comes out every couple of years and assesses the status of where we are towards the 30 by 30 target. So that's just a flavor of the many things we're doing. Support is there. There's lots of amazing stuff going on. I think we're really advancing this agenda rapidly, but more progress needs to be done. So I'll hand back to Jane there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Johnny. So there's very good progress in how to move to nature positive, and that is growing all the time. No excuse not to move. But as we've heard earlier, we really need to move the trillions towards nature positive. So David, can you mention how you see biodiversity credits and this approach in the market? How would you position that in terms of this bigger acceleration that's needed?
Well, thank you very much for the question. Thank you very much for the dinner and being invited to this group to talk on this topic. Before I jump to biodiversity credit markets, I just think it's important to remember the prize that we have, which is how do we redirect even a small percentage of the trillions of dollars that flow every day through the financial system away from harmful activities to nature positive. And biodiversity credit markets might just be one tool that helps do that. But we shouldn't get seduced into the idea that suddenly these things are going to arrive and magic away all the harm that's been done because we have a market for nature. So I think what I've learned, having worked on this now for just a few months, on the back of TNFD, is a few things. One is we have to define what is there today, what there could be tomorrow, and what there probably won't be with biodiversity credit markets. And we have to change our notion of the idea that a fungible traded unit of nature that is traded around the world is suddenly going to solve our problems. Because what is happening today, which is very good but very small, is a set of investment projects that are being developed around the world, which have been financed to preserve or restore natural ecosystems. And the question is, how can we scale them? So the lens that I bring to this, having spent many years building financial infrastructure and financial markets, is let's not jump to the idea that suddenly we have traded markets. The markets that we will see will be more analogous to project finance, project development. They'll be used definitely to solve policy incentives that people give, like we see in the UK, like we see in Colombia, like we see in the US and other markets. They'll be used to help insetting. That could be the largest part of this market that we'll see. They'll be used for offsetting, providing that we observe, of course, the hierarchy of mitigation, that we don't use that as an excuse to not do the good things. And the question is, how do we scale them? And how do we put the rules, the transparency, and the incentives in place so that they do what they're designed to do? Back to the goal here is to redirect financial flows to nature-positive outcomes, to invest with nature, to live in peace with nature, as Minister said. So I think the opportunity is to create that incentive structure. This is a very nascent market. One thing I've learned is we're seduced by the idea, and there's many projects around the world looking at this, we've got to work together. We're seduced by the idea that they could solve the problem. There are quite a few experts, many in the room. There's quite a lot of opinions on this market as well. We have to figure out the difference between them and focus and trial. So what we're going to do next is really work on the projects and put some pilots in place. We need to bring industry in. We need to work out what the demand drivers really are, and we need to test. And we also need to allow for a little bit of experimentation so that people can get a few things wrong and learn in the process. Anyone who's looked at these schemes will know some of the mistakes that have been made. But the other thing that I would advise us all to do is stop translating our notion and model of voluntary carbon markets onto nature markets. We've got to think about this differently than voluntary carbon markets. This is not a fungible item that can be traded. This is something that companies, investors, and financiers will support because the incentives are in place to do them. So I hope at the next nature dinner we actually have a description of all the markets in place, the incentives, the rules, and we make a lot more progress from where we are today, because this is just one tool. It's a valuable tool. But if I have any asks of this room, let's change our frame of reference of how we think about this. Not as suddenly traded markets, not suddenly as the next version of voluntary carbon markets, but development projects, investment projects with rules, with governance that can help fund, align and redirect the financial flows into nature positive outcomes.
Thank you very much, David. Now, I've been given the evil eye by Marco, so we have to wrap up. But I want to make one remark. So I'm very aware that since Her Excellency the Minister spoke into this panel, we switched from something that was really about changing hearts and minds and making nature positive everybody's business to suddenly the technical solutions. And we need both, of course. So I just want to end this session by saying we mustn't neglect to really make sure that nature positive is not just something that our kind of organisations are busy working on, but that it is owned and believed in by everybody, and that it's also people positive. So we really need to elevate this whole concept that needs a big communications marketing campaign that we haven't got to yet. But I would like also to thank this great panel for sharing all the progress that's happening. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Patricia Zurita. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer of Conservation International. Thank you so much, Jane, for that panel. Minister Mohammed, can I just say, as an Ecuadorian neighbor of your country, thank you for the courage on taking on the COP. We needed you. We needed that courage. And we're all here to help you. So thank you so much. And I wanted to go with courage because I wanted to move from all the progress that we have done in terms of disclosure and measures and commitments into practice. And to move into practice nature positive at this sector where we're going to talk about, it requires courage. So I want to start by inviting Ro to come and join us because he's going to make a very important announcement. Ro Dowan, for those of you who don't know him, is the Chief Executive of the International Council of Minerals and Metals. Ro, the floor is yours.
So as you get served your 3D printed steak, you must think of me because Andre will know that last year I made a promise. You remember that, Andre? I made a promise that I would not be back this year unless I could demonstrate to you on behalf of the 24 members that belong to the organization I proudly represent, ICMM, that we as the mining industry are collectively stepping up our leadership on the challenge of nature positive. So, I'm here, and I can tell you that I had Deliveroo on speed dial for a year. I'm not going to need that anymore because this meal is going to taste good. You see, friends, I'm proud to announce for the first time publicly that the 24 companies of ICMM, representing 1/3 of the global mining industry across 650 sites in over 50 countries, have committed today to a series of actions to contribute to a nature-positive future. Like all our commitments, these are binding, non-negotiable conditions of membership, and they apply to all our operations. Our commitments begin with our direct impacts, but they extend to our landscapes, our value chains, and the systems of which we are a part. You'll find full details of these on nature.icmm.com, but let me give you the quick highlights. For our direct operations, we will follow the mitigation hierarchy to ensure at least no net loss of biodiversity at closure at all sites against a 2020 baseline. This is in addition to our long-standing commitment to not mine in World Heritage sites and to respect all legally designated protected areas. In our value chains, we will identify the risks to nature from the actions of our customers and suppliers. We'll support partnerships to mitigate harm and require our highest risk suppliers to conduct and disclose nature-related impact, dependency, risk, and opportunity assessments in priority locations. In our landscapes, companies can elect to either restore, conserve, or regenerate nature in line with the GBF targets, partner with others on landscape level initiatives, or help repurpose abandoned sites or waste streams to reduce the pressure on nature from new production. And to help change the economic system, companies will choose to either contribute to research and development to reduce mining's impact on nature, improve the quality and quantity of data, or help develop sustainable finance mechanisms. All of this is underpinned by a commitment to transparency, which means that every ICMM company will, by 2026, integrate nature into decision-making, including governance, strategy, and risk management, disclose material nature-related impacts, dependencies, risks, and opportunities for operations in priority locations, and for the most material value chain issues by 2030, and work with others to develop consistent and robust metrics for reporting progress towards nature-positive outcomes. Now, in a minute, you'll hear from 4 CEOs who have been absolute champions of this work to share what it means to them, and without whose leadership this would not be possible. Look, you must be thinking, mining and nature positive, this wasn't what you thought you would hear today. And let me be clear with you, we are at least as culpable as anybody else for the state of nature we find ourselves in today. But if we're going to grow mining to the extent that's necessary to provide critical minerals for the energy transition, society rightly expects that we do so while halting and reversing nature loss. These commitments answer that call. And Andre and Rosalie and Marco and friends and Algo and others who were here last year, you need to know this. You need to know that this event and what we did last year and what we spoke about last year was inspiration for these commitments. And for that reason, you'll forever be etched in our hearts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ro, and thank you for the courage of leading the ICMM and leading your partners to be part of this movement. So before I call this panel, let me just thank one more time Rosalie and Andre for having us here, but for especially for believing in us coming together and being able to be the source of change. I want to bring on the panel Ivan Arriagada, Chief Executive of Antofagasta LLP, Jakob Staulum, dear friend, it's good to see you, and Jonathan Price, Chief Executive of Tech Canada. Please join me. I cannot. Is this working? Yeah. All right. I'm going to start by saying, Ro, your next challenge is more women here. Sorry, but I cannot be your diversity. Apologies. Okay, so the 3 of you have been selected to come and tell us how you're going to start. I know, apologies. I had to say it, I'm sorry.
You're pushing us before we have even started. Thank you.
I know. But look, I was the first female woman from a developing country leading a conservation organization. I can say this. All right, so you guys have taken on this incredible commitment, moving the mining sector and the mineral sector into a more nature positive. We're not there yet, and that statement still not nature positive. We're going in the right direction, however. So I want to put you on the spot and one by one start talking. Ivan, I'm going to start with you. Chile, incredibly important place, part of a hotspot, a biodiversity hotspot. How are you going to do things differently? Antofagasta has been committed to social and economic development. You are committed to reducing your impact. How do we push forward? How do we do not only no harm, how do we become nature positive?
Okay, thank you, and thank you for the invitation. Maybe just a general reflection. We are copper producers. Chile is a big copper producing country. And I think we do believe that copper is required for a key challenge that we all know and have, which is climate change, because electrification of transport, of industry needs more copper. And therefore the challenge is mining copper does have impacts, land, water, and other impacts. So how do we do mine and produce the copper that is required, minimizing, avoiding, or compensating for those impacts? And that's why we had embraced sustainability as a concept for responsible mining, some years ago, and that's the way that we look at mining from the point of view of what we do. But I think this commitment and the focus on nature positive brings two things which I think are fundamentally new in the way that we look at this. First, it goes beyond, it expands our impacts and how we look at them on land and water. And that's absolutely fundamental because it puts nature in the center stage. It's biodiversity and more. That's one big element. And the second one, I think, which has been talked here, is that it provides a global framework, the Global Biodiversity Framework, which allows us basically to develop our actions, to commit with measurable targets, and be able to disclose in a way that is consistent. So I think from that point of view, the position statement that Ro has described is critical and very existential to the way that we do mine. Now, some of the things that we've been doing, just to mention a few, we're running our mines on 100% of renewable energy. Chile is blessed with solar energy and wind to a lesser extent, and therefore we've been able to move the way that we produce copper in a way that we use 100% renewable energy. Water. Chile has been a country that has been quite impacted by climate change, and especially in terms of drought. We're moving to be able to essentially source more than 90% of the water that we use in our mines to be either recycled water or water from the sea by 2025. And then land. Land, which is extremely important. We do impact land, but we're doing projects of preservation and conservation of around 6 times the land that we've impacted. But again, I say those things that we're doing are good, but they're not enough. And this commitment puts nature in the center stage, and especially biodiversity. And therefore, that's the next step in which we're going to be working so that we achieve a future with positive nature outcomes. And we're very committed to doing that because we think copper can be produced as a way of green copper to be able to contribute to one of the key challenges that we have, which is climate change.
Thank you so much, Ivan. And you mentioned something that is incredibly important. We are all for a transition to renewables as quickly as possible, but we all depend on you to make sure that that transition doesn't make the same mistakes that we have seen over the last 150 years, destroying nature in the process. So thank you so much for your remarks. Jakob. You had to go through a fire drill with a fireside chat that was more like a fire drill in Montreal, but you know me. This is a friendly one. You guys actually, Rio Tinto came on with a very strong statement of no seabed mining, which, please clap. Thank you. For those of us who love the ocean, that is an incredible commitment, and we cannot thank you enough for coming and taking the courage of making that statement. But let's go. Rio is a massive actor in the mining sector. You have committed to a very strong climate target. You and I had a very candid conversation in Montreal about how difficult biodiversity is. And here you are, a year later, really looking into nature positive. What are we going to do differently? How are we going to get Rio to that level?
Look, thank you very much. And Patricia, really appreciate how you put it into perspective. First of all, I have to admit, it's been a big learning journey, and I learned an awful lot at COP15 in Montreal. The first thing I learned was that I clearly didn't understood enough about it. And the more you learn about nature, the more you realize how massive the challenges. We spend so much time on addressing climate change, and suddenly climate change perhaps even looks small compared to the challenge of getting it right on biodiversity. I also, when I look around in the room here, I'm a little bit scared of sitting here on the front, because I know I'm probably still one of them who know least about the topic. The good thing about being CEO, though, is I'm not here to be right. I'm here to get it right. And we got amazing people in Rio Tinto. And it's really about just setting the tone for that we are unleashing all the qualities of the people that we have, addressing the challenges of nature. It's very wide-fold in the whole chain of mining, starting with mining projects. How do we do mining projects? Mining operations, and how do we actually really rehabilitate the environment when we one day close the mine? And I would argue today we are absolutely committed in all phases. We do a number of things that makes a huge difference, but I also have to admit that mining does have an impact, and it puts a huge responsibility on us and a company. I probably shouldn't say it, but I still say that we are sitting here in Switzerland, and Rio Tinto has land the size of Switzerland, and that kind of feels like a burden. But you know, the reality is, people in Rio Tinto, it's shared with our values. We want to make a difference, and we have to get it right. And if I should really start answering your question, I've spoken a little bit around it, then, for example, some of you might have seen that we have just decided to develop a major iron ore project in Guinea. And that's not an easy task, the Simandou project, because if you just take a step back, first of all, it's actually good for the climate because it's the highest grade iron ore on the planet. It's iron ore that doesn't have to go through a blast furnace, but can go through DIR and electric arc furnace, so you would be able to reduce the CO2 emissions. But it's not easy to develop this project. It requires 650 kilometers of railroad, a new port. If we get it right, it's a country maker for Guinea. If we don't get it right, we would always be responsible for the impact on nature. We are absolutely committed to get this done to the highest standards. And at some stage, the construction will have probably 70,000 people working at the same time. So it's easy to get every piece right. But in aggregate, with offsets, we need to find a way to have this project to be nature positive. And I know around here, I really do believe that civil society has a big role to play. You got to crawl over projects like that and hold us accountable, and hopefully raise it also to us when you think things are not right. It's a constant learning process, but we are absolutely convinced that it is possible. And we just have to also recognize we will not be able to do the energy transition without some mining. We are in Rio Tinto going in, and we have actually now starting big scale to do recyclability, to focus more on secondary and not just primary mining, so you reduce the impact, but the world still asks for it. And we are totally committed. We are still, where's Ro? He's sitting there. It's been an absolutely pleasure to work in ICMM. You know, we are 24 companies who are competitors, and there are a lot of things we can't talk about. But when it comes to nature, there should be nothing. And I learn a lot from my two colleagues here, Eduardo van Baarle, and Ro is facilitating discussions here. We have an obligation to learn from each other, and I think that's effectively what it's doing. But you know what? It's all very nice. We sit here and make good statements. It actually starts tomorrow, and you should keep the dialogue, hold us accountable, and we need to go into the detail. For sure, we're not having everything right, and we want to learn from you, and hopefully you will judge us, not just on what you see, but also on how we react to what you're seeing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jakob. And can I say, Simandou, for those of you who don't know, it is an incredibly complicated project. It's at the heart of a place that is incredibly endemic, not only for some birds, which we love, Marco and I, but also for primates and plants. And we will be looking to you. We will be holding you accountable, but also know that here, the biodiversity and the conservation community are here to work with you. We want to be on this journey, learning with you and making sure that we can really prove that this can be nature positive projects. All right, let me finish up with Jonathan. Jonathan, it's not only about biodiversity, of course, it's about local communities too. You come from a country where First Nations are incredibly important and have been affected by the mining sector. How does this nature positive help us push the envelope further?
Yeah, that's a great lens to take on this, and I'll get to that. First of all, I'm going to mention a couple of things, because you've prodded us to say, what are we actually doing? And there's a few things at Tech that we've actually done or are doing. Our first area of focus has been on what you could call ecosystem enablement. So 2 years ago, we entered into a $4 billion sustainability-linked loan, because we need to see finance flow into this sector to support the sort of projects that we want to deliver and develop in the future. So that was an early commitment we made. I'm very pleased to say that as of this week, we are now an early adopter of the TNFD recommendations, and that is something we very much want to support again, because that's a critical part of the ecosystem that is going to support progress on nature and biodiversity. We made a commitment as an organization 2 years ago that every hectare of land we disturb through our activities, and as Jakob rightly says, we do make an impact, we have to acknowledge that, but for every hectare we disturb, we will conserve or rehabilitate 3 hectares. And we have started to enter into a whole series of projects in the regions in which we operate. One in British Columbia, where we've invested in the Dark Woods project with the Nature Conservancy of Canada to protect old growth forest. And this old growth forest is pristine and it's precious and it's disappearing. And in Chile, we've worked with the Chilean Nature Fund to invest in the protection of the Juan Fernandez Archipelago, which is a UNESCO site that's at risk. So we've taken real steps and real actions through partnerships. Now, to get to your very good question about our First Nations in Canada, because you're right, they are a critical partner for everything we do in our operations. And that's a journey I personally have to say I've been on over the last couple of years. I'm new to Canada. I've operated in other parts of the world. That's new to me. And I've spent an enormous amount of time listening to what is important to the First Nations in the areas in which we operate. And conventionally what mining companies have done is they've put in place agreements with First Nations where we've given them financial compensation for the land, where we've built capability in their communities. And of course they want all of those things. But they tell me and they tell us that that's not what really matters, because they have a spiritual connection to the land, as we've heard from the minister. This is about their ancestry, and it cannot be compensated for purely in financial terms. So what we do now, as we develop mines in Canada, we co-design those mines to where we can eliminate the impact, where we can't eliminate an impact, to design around the impacts to minimize harm, taking a perspective through their eyes rather than the perspective from a traditional capitalist, hey, if I pay you for this resource, then this will be okay, to say that actually it isn't okay to mine this area, or if we want to access this area, we need to do it using novel technology. So we have a lot to learn. We're all, as Jakob said, we're sort of building our literacy in this area. We rely on partners to help us with this learning. We rely on the people in this room to help us learn and challenge us. But we will listen, and we will make changes based on what we hear. So please keep the feedback coming, and hopefully that gives you an idea of some of the action that at Tech we're already taking, and now we're incredibly proud to be part of the ICM and the commitments that they've made and we've made as part of that, because I think that can drive change in our sector, and hopefully we can point to other sectors and say, hey, you need to be doing something similar here.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I started saying this was a courage session because we are putting this in practice in a sector that is incredibly hard, but incredibly important for the transition. So I want to thank you all, and please go back to your places. And let me bring Eduardo Bartolomeo, CEO of Vale. Thank you, Ivan. Thank you. For some closing remarks. Eduardo, before you start, just one super quick second. I know, Marco, you want to kill me for this, but this is, I know, this is the way that we pave the road. By having these type of companies, by having this sector coming and taking the steps that are really demonstrating that you're committing to nature positive, what makes the difference. If we don't start proving on the ground yesterday, not now, not tomorrow, yesterday, we're not going to make it happen. So Ivan, closing remarks.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, Eduardo, sorry.
Is it working? Yes. Okay, I'll be very fast, Marco, don't worry. But I have to make a testimony because André mentioned Amazonia, and we were there for 40 years. Vale operates in Amazonia, and we learned a lot. We're talking about learning. I think mining has a paradox. We are a nature-based business. We need nature. Nature is the core of what we do. And actually, people talk about biodiversity, talk about climate change, and Amazon is in the tipping point of both. And as I lived 20 years this story. So, and what we see there is exactly what we're talking here. It's commitment and partnership. We wouldn't do that without the law that enforces to be a national forest, without the indigenous people that shares half of the land that we protect. Just to have an idea, it's a Guinea, by the way. We protect 5 times the city of London. It's 800,000 hectares, and we impact 2%. So I think it can be done and has to be done. Otherwise, we're not doing the right thing for our own business. And again, I would like to, thanks the Nature Positive for the chance to bring us here and highlight what we're doing. And of course, thanks ICMM to leading this. And we have the courage, and for sure you can be sure that we're gonna walk our talk. Thank you very much. Obrigado, Patrícia.
Thank you very, very much. And I think this is exactly nature positive in practice. So congratulations, ICMM, for sticking your neck out and committing, but also at the same time implementing. I told you it was an expensive dinner, so the bill is going up now. We're going to have a quick fire conversation with a few interventions, but before that, it's my absolute honor to invite to the stage somebody that was with us, again, from the very first dinner 5 editions ago, the Honorable Al Gore, former Vice President of the United States.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Marco. Thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, what an honor it is to be here. And yes, I've been here since the beginning. And whoever said earlier that this is the most important dinner in Davos, I want to second that emotion. I used to think of this, and maybe I still do, as the home of the rebellion here at the Woodstock. Which has a lot of value, by the way, in many, many ways. And I want to congratulate and thank the members of the International Council on Mining and Metals. Very, very impressive. I've met with some of you guys and really am impressed with the sincerity of your commitment and the humility of the learning journey that you have embarked upon. And that's really what it takes. And there's so many special guests here that I feel as if I really should single out individually. There are so many bright lights here and so many heroes and so many women and men who have been doing this work for so long, and God bless you and thank you. But I certainly want to thank my friend Andre. And Andre, thank you so much for your leadership. And by the way, many of you saw it, or you'll see it on the videotape if you haven't already, but Andre gave a magnificent and very eloquent speech on the main stage at the Nature and Climate session in Congress Hall in the main plenary event. But along with Andre, I mean, I think I really should ask all of you to join me in honoring and recognizing and thanking the more significant member of the Hoffman family. Rosalie, where are you? Would you stand up, Rosalie? Stand up. Oh, come on. Come
Speaking of humility, she doesn't want to stand up, but that's the way she is. But thank you so much. So when this dinner began, there was a lot. There were a lot of dreams, and there still are. But this edition marks an achievement. This marks the one-year anniversary of the adoption of the nature-positive goal of halting and reversing biodiversity loss by 2030. That's something to really celebrate. And like the COP agreements on climate, it's something to also make sure is implemented, because the deeper meaning of these agreements and the language they embody and include really depends upon what comes after the agreement. And of course, the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis are inextricably linked, as I think almost everyone has understood clearly for quite a long time. We not only need to solve the climate crisis in order to protect nature, we have to protect nature in order to solve the climate crisis. They go together, and Johan is nodding his head, so I know I'm on the right track here. The biodiversity crisis facing our planet threatens not only the web of life, but also everything from our agricultural systems to coastal defenses against extreme weather, and you can go on and on. And of course, the intricate interrelationship of the overlapping and interlocking webs of biodiversity are in danger of being disrupted by the climate crisis and by the chemical pollution that is part and parcel of the climate crisis. And it's also a matter of philosophy, because we have seen since, oh gosh, I don't know how far back to go in history, but whenever it was in ancient times when we began this colonialist and imperialist and aggressive conquest of nature and extraction of dead things from the ground to burn and power the steam engine and all the other subsequent machines of the industrial and the subsequent revolutions that have led to the complex civilization that we have now. But there is another way of living in harmony with nature. And I would like to venture an idea related to carbon removal. You know, Johan and others have alerted us to the fact that we're now in the danger zone, and of course, on the climate side, we've tried to keep this commitment to stay below an increase in temperatures no greater than 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial times. And actually, in the year 2023, shockingly, 50% of the days were above 1.5. In November, 2 days were above 2 degrees increase Celsius. So that writing is on the wall, but it should not cause us to despair because we're not done yet. But it should lead us to question what some have regarded as the necessity from this overshoot to really invest a huge amount of money in carbon removal. I respect all the analyses, and I've read them and I understand them, I believe, to the best of my ability. But I want to offer you two alternative pathways to removing the excess carbon from the atmosphere. Of course, you know, we're putting 162 million tons of man-made, human-made global warming pollution into the atmosphere every day. Some of you have heard me opine before on the significance of how thin that blue shell around the planet is. It's blue because that's where the oxygen is, and it's thin enough that if you could drive a car at Autobahn speed straight up in the air, you get to the top of that blue line in 5 to 7 minutes, and all the global warming pollution would be below you. And we're spewing an enormous amount every day into it, and it lingers there. On average, each molecule stays about 100 years. And so it mounts up, and the quantity that is there now that has mounted up, there will be more tomorrow, but as of today, the amount that's there traps as much extra heat in the Earth system as would be released by 750,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding on the Earth every single day. Numbers like that are hard to really absorb and understand in a visceral way. It's a big number, okay, I get it, but you know, if you ever saw the movie Oppenheimer, you know the significance of one device of that magnitude, and to think that we're doing thousands of them every hour is just maddening to me. Maddening. I press my own buttons these days, so strap in. But if we do accept the challenge that we have to not only transform our energy sector to renewables, and of course we can do that, I'll come back to that, but if we accept the fact that we need to also remove some of the carbon, how should we do that? Well, there are a couple of highly technological, machine-based, expensive technologies that the oil and gas industry are pushing very aggressively: carbon capture and sequestration and direct air capture. Oh boy. So, carbon capture and sequestration. First of all, you have to say that technology works. Every part of it works. You can build these things, and you run you capture the carbon as it goes through these amine filters, and then you compress it and put it down in the ground and bury it in a geologically appropriate repository. And every part of it works. And not only that, it's not like nuclear waste. If you put it in an appropriate geological repository, the longer it stays there, the safer it gets, because it over time is absorbed in the pores of the rock formations into which it's located. There is a problem. It is extremely energy intensive, and it's extremely expensive. If you are the CEO of a utility and you want to install one of these machines and bolt it on top of your fossil fuel burning facility, if it's an electricity generation facility, you can do that. You will have to, however, take 35% of the electricity that you're now selling to your customers and use it to run this device. And the business leaders who are a big part of this group here will tell you there are not that many business models that can afford to take more than a third of their revenue and just dispense with it in order to undertake something like this. And of course, most of these facilities are quite some distance from the repository that is geologically suitable. It takes some time to find such a repository. The underground geology, as our mining friends and colleagues here can say far better than I, is enormously complex and varied and complicated, and it takes some time to characterize a site. And so there is a proposal from the fossil fuel industry in the United States that's really enthusiastic about this carbon capture and sequestration thing, because it means, you know, we can keep burning fossil fuels. Yeah, we'll just catch all the emissions as they're going into the air. They have a proposal to construct a massive network of CO2 pipelines covering as many kilometers, almost as many kilometers as all of the oil and gas pipelines that currently exist. Okay. If it leaks, the CO2 hugs the ground. There have been some unfortunate accidents where people have been suffocated because they can't breathe, because the CO2 fills their lungs. And I don't want to tell a scare story about that, but it's a real thing. And in Cameroon, there was a horrible incident related to different cause, but it illustrated the danger. And there was an accident in one of the first demonstration CO2 pipelines in Mississippi. And the interesting side footnote, the emergency vehicles that were called to respond, they couldn't get there because the CO2 shorted out the carburetors of the internal combustion engines, and so all the trucks and cars just came to a dead stop, and the ambulances and the police vehicles couldn't get there. So there are a few problems. And the expense of those pipelines and the feelings and opinions of the people whose backyards and lands through which these CO2 pipelines go. I don't want to endorse NIMBYism, don't get me wrong, but they tried it in the upper Midwest, and conservative Republican farmers said, no, we're not going to do that. So there's a problem with the carbon capture and sequestration, massive pipeline, massive, expensive, hugely energy intensive. Then there's direct air capture. These are giant vacuuming machines that suck in air, and the advantage is you can use these anywhere because the air is fully homogeneous, and wherever you suck the air in, you can filter the CO2 out, and I guess it works too, they tell me. Not well. The leading technology is up to the ability to capture 27 seconds worth of annual emissions in a year's time. And 30 years from now, they are optimistically projecting that the cost will be down to 3 times as expensive as the economic modelers tell us is necessary to make it feasible. The problem with that approach is probably physics, because CO2 is 0.035% of the air. So to build a giant mechanical vacuum machine that goes through 99.965% of all the other molecules to pick out the CO2, and then you have to compress it and do the whole other routine as well. And where does the energy come from? More fossil fuels? Or maybe solar and wind. And if it's solar and wind, maybe I'm crazy, but could we just take that solar and wind and replace the things that are putting the CO2 up there in the first place? Instead, wouldn't that be a smarter approach? So that's the second approach to carbon removal. But I want to venture at this Nature Positive dinner a proposal that I'm quite serious about for nature positive carbon removal. First of all, it involves obeying the first law of holes when you're in one, stop digging. And it's based on the well-established science that if and when we get to true net zero and stop adding extra heat-trapping molecules to the troposphere, when we get to true net zero, the temperatures on Earth will stop going up almost immediately. The lag time is projected to be as little as 3 to 5 years. It is a metaphorical switch that we can flip. Hard to switch that flip, but it's not impossible. It is desirable. It's feasible. It's not impractical. The substitutes for burning fossil fuels, there are some use cases where fossil fuels will be a little bit harder to replace in a short time frame. But for electricity generation, the number one use, and for transportation, land transportation for sure, we can do it with solar and wind and batteries and electric vehicles, and it's cheaper in about 95% of the world now, soon 100% of the world. and it eliminates the co-pollution of particulates that kills 8.7 million people from lung diseases and conditions every single year. So that's a side benefit. And it also creates 3 times as many jobs per dollar invested compared to the dollars invested in the poisonous fossil economy. So we can do it. It's really not, and the IEA, as many of you know, has said in peer-reviewed studies that haven't been seriously challenged by anyone, that we have all the technologies we need right now with proven deployment models to get halfway there in the next 7 years, and we have clear line of sight to get the rest of the way there by 2050, so we can do this. But here is the second scientific basis for this nature-positive carbon removal proposal. Astonishingly, but accurately according to the scientists, if we stay at true net zero, 50% of all of the human-caused CO2 and other greenhouse gases, methane even faster, 50% of all the human-emitted CO2 will have fallen out of the atmosphere in as little as a quarter century, 25 to 30 years. You talk about a massive volume of carbon removal at zero marginal cost that is nature positive, nature enabled, nature powered. We stop doing the bad things and let nature remove the carbon for us. Nature positive carbon removal at a massive scale. We stop the temperature going up and we start the long healing process. That's what we ought to do. So if you examine the practicality of this approach, we just got a report today that the electric vehicle sales in India doubled this past year, year on year. 20% of all car sales last year were electric vehicles. 50% of all two-wheeler sales were electric last year. That's really going, and battery replacement is part of the model that's driving that very quickly, and many more people travel on 2 wheels than on 4 wheels. So that's coming along pretty nicely. And solar and wind, as many of you know, 80% of all the new electricity generation last year was solar and wind. Green hydrogen has a role. I won't go through the rest of the opportunities there. Now, the other reason for embarking quickly on this journey is, of course, that the danger is increasing very rapidly, and Johan covered this extremely completely, better than I could. There was a new study published in the journal Nature today that recalculates, on the basis of observations and artificial intelligence over the last several decades, the loss of ice in Greenland. 30 million tons per hour. 30 million tons per hour. Some of you have been there and seen this in the warm parts of the year. It's crazy. Another study shows that many scientists believe that the Atlantic Meridional overturning current, the Gulf Stream is the major, best known part of it, has slowed now by 30%. Other studies show that the 1/3 of the land mass in the northern hemisphere that is frozen and contains great masses of dead plants and dead animals, when it thaws, if we allow it to thaw, will release CO2 and methane in quantities and at a rate unknown, because it's very difficult to study. But the risk is extremely high, and there are many other risks that we are taking. So it's crazy what's going on. And it's crazy not only because of the danger that we are risking for all future generations and for the present generation as well, but because we can solve this. We have everything that we need. What are the obstacles? there are two main obstacles to moving faster. One is finance related, and I won't spend a lot of time on this. Many of you know it and you've worked on it. And that is that the system of allocating capital globally walls off most of the developing countries where the increased emissions are mainly expected to originate. And it was set up in a time when the great powers that are now the developed nations designed it, and anyway, it doesn't work for the developing countries because the interest rate for borrowing money to build a solar farm in Nigeria is 7 times higher than the interest rate in Switzerland or the United States. And so it's prohibitive, so they can't do it. All of this installation of renewable energy around the world, which is so amazing, 80% last year, 93% in India. India is an outlier among the developing countries. It's incredible. 86% of the capital comes from the private market. It can't come from government. Some of it can be, it can and should and must, of course, and should open the way to the private markets. But if you are an investor and you want to invest in a solar farm and in a developing country, and you have absolutely no control or line of sight on what the currency value fluctuation is, or the rule of law and your ability to enforce contracts, the level of corruption, the offtake agreements, and there's a long list of them. Currency fluctuation is probably the biggest one. Then you can't do it, and so they don't get the money. In Africa, the percentage of private capital that goes to these projects is only 14%, not 86%. It's the exact reverse as in the developing country. We have to fix that. Now, on the panel this afternoon with Andre was Ajay Banga and Kristalina Georgieva, the World Bank head and the IMF head. Wow, weren't they great, Andre? And this is a new partnership between these two great Bretton Woods institutions, and the plans they spelled out were really inspiring. And they themselves will say, not enough yet, but boy, they've got the bit in their teeth, and they're really going. So I'm very optimistic we may be able to solve that. What's the second obstacle to moving faster? It is the determined, massively financed, grossly unethical, persistent, unyielding opposition of the fossil fuel companies and the petrostates. They are blocking progress. And some of you know Naomi Oreskes, I was with her earlier, she's one of the ones to document this. They took the blueprint from the tobacco industry. You know this story. When the Surgeon General said cigarettes are killing people, the tobacco companies hired actors and dressed them up as doctors in white suits with stethoscopes and put them in front of cameras to lie and say, hi, I'm a doctor and there's no health problem with cigarettes. And 100 million people died in the name of pure greed. The same PR firms, the same fixers and lawyers and lobbyists were hired because of their experience to work for the fossil fuel industry. And they're putting out falsehoods. You know, this year, as every year, the World Economic Forum puts out a list of the most serious risks that the global economy and global civilization is facing. And these business leaders will tell you their boards require a risk oversight committee. My company has one, very common, Andres does. This is a global risk oversight committee. And the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis are certainly, they've been right near the top of the list, or if not the top year after year. This year there's a new number one risk: misinformation and disinformation. This morning there was a massive study by an NGO, very well documented. I was very impressed with their work and presentation about the new climate denial. Did any of you see the story? They're evading the YouTube restrictions and the online policing. One of the examples they show was a guy in a trucker hat standing in a solar field saying these solar fields have electromagnetic radiation that causes cancer. And of course it's idiotic, but they put that out there. And the people who are interested in that video, they click on it, and the internet provider, the video provider says, oh, you like that? I got some more for you. I got some more like that. Oh, you like a little variation on it? I got that too. The rabbit holes. The rabbit holes. This is the first generation AI. This is even before the generative AI and the deep fakes, and that's undoubtedly going to be a problem. That's already started too. But the algorithms that suck people down these rabbit holes, for nature positive, we ought to call these rabbit holes pitcher plants. The sides are slippery, and they go all the way down. You know what's at the bottom of the rabbit hole? That's where the echo chamber is. And if you stay in the echo chamber long enough, you become vulnerable to a new kind of AI, not artificial intelligence, artificial insanity. I kid you not. Where do you think this these crazy cult-like things come from? QAnon. Really? You know? And climate denial, election denial. That comes from the echo chamber. That's artificial insanity. And now we have this wave of authoritarian populism, and you felt a chill perhaps as I did 2 nights ago with the election in one state in my country. I'm embarrassed and I'm sorry, and I hope it doesn't portend even worse. But it's not only in my country. There is a wave of authoritarian populism. Adolf Hitler's book was entitled The Triumph of the Will, which implies to me a question. What is the will triumphing over? I think the will of these dictators, and they're all very similar, you know, in many ways. They're wackos and they're just bad in so many ways. But their will triumphs over the authority of knowledge. And I use the phrase the authority of knowledge because knowledge is the basis of the manner in which free women and men reason together and conduct a democratic discourse to interrogate the knowledge that is available and have a discourse to try to decide together what's more likely to be true than not, and then make decisions on the basis of what they agree is the best available evidence. That's what democracy is all about. But it's being disrupted. It's being blocked. It's being assaulted. And that paves the way for these dictators. Just last week, the American Petroleum Institute announced a brand new campaign. You know, we had in COP28 the great victory, and it's a genuine victory to get the language saying that we commit to transitioning away from fossil fuels. Well, if they're serious about that commitment, why did they announce an 8-figure advertising campaign to convince people that it's impossible to transition away from fossil fuels? Why is the new climate denial spreading? Every newspaper or magazine article or internet story that deals with climate, check the comment blocks. Many of you have done that, and you know what you'll find. Comment after comment, even in progressive-oriented publications. Well, you know, you hear these zombie memes that you first encountered years ago that are just objectively nuts, but they continue like zombies to poison the ability of people to reason together. They're not hallucinations like AI. They were intentionally created, but they're zombies and they continue. And they're designed to disrupt the authority and overturn the authority of knowledge. Why is it that the largest member of OPEC announced last week, 4 days ago, that the transition away knowledge commitment is optional? I'm not saying that the agreement has no meaning, but I am saying that the meaning is going to come from what we do together in order to make sure that the agreement is kept. You know, I'll close with this. We need to eliminate the subsidies for fossil fuel. I'm thrilled that Nigeria just did it, and they had, we're subsidizing fossil fuels at a rate 42 times greater than the subsidies for renewables. We need to eliminate that. Nigeria's had just an amazing expansion of solar in just a few months because they got rid of the diesel that all the businesses use to fuel the generators for their electricity. And we need some kind of fee on carbon. And you know, what a carbon tax and the two-state solution in the Middle East have in common is we've known for decades it's the only real solution for the respective problem, but both are so difficult people have given up really pushing them. We got to push them, both of them. We got to get rid of those algorithms. They're the digital equivalent of AR-15s. They ought to be illegal. And we ought to have a carbon fee, and we might be able to get one through the pathway of this carbon border adjustment mechanism. And it's controversial, but I think that's what we ought to do. And I think that, in closing, the greatest speech in the English language, in my view and view of others, was by Abraham Lincoln when he said, in part, "The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. We must disenthrall ourselves, and then we will save our country." Disenthrall comes from the word thrall, which I'm informed was an ancient Scandinavian institution of voluntary enslavement. We are voluntarily enslaving ourselves to an energy system that relies on digging up these dead things and burning them in ways that destroys the future of our species. We must disenthrall ourselves, and then we will save nature and we'll save the future of humanity. And we have the ability to do it. As I've said in times past, the only potential thing we lack is sufficient political will. But as many of you know, political will is itself a renewable resource. Thank you very much.
You know, I have to say, for somebody like Al, busy as you are, and squashed as you are in Davos with also the request of demand to spend so much energy and passion to spend that with us is just humbling. 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 Thank you. And of course, when you invite Al Gore, he carried away by the passion, and of course we're a little bit late on the program. But we're going to keep it very short, and I have good news for you, because I keep it as a little bit of a surprise. So at some point in about 20 minutes, the dinner will turn into a nightcap. So courtesy of Andre, I'm not sure how it's going to work, but probably something will go down, and magically a bar will appear at the end. And we're going to be able to stay here, stay here and wake up tomorrow morning. So look forward to the moment of relaxation after that. But bear with us for another 20 minutes, because now we have a lot of people. No, sorry, no, not a lot of people. No. We have a few people that will intervene from the audience, from you, from the tables. And I'm going to be joined. Can I switch on the mic? I'm going to be joined. Thank you. I'm going to be joined by Eva Zabay. Eva is known to most of you, I'm sure, but anyway, she's the CEO of Business for Nature, one of the most dynamic sustainability business platforms. And together we're going to roll around and capture a few interested people. I'm going to start because the only one who can cope with following the Al Gore Act is my dear friend and absolute hero of the ocean, Peter Thompson, the UN Secretary General Envoy for the Ocean. And Peter, I don't know if you noticed, but in your honor, we put a nice turtle and coral reef on the top, because when you talk about nature positive, of course the ocean is part of it, right?
Actually, today was a day when the world changed a little bit for me, because for the last 2 decades I've been banging on about the sustainable blue economy. We had a conference in Kenya, you remember, David, on the sustainable blue economy in 2018. 10,000 people turned up to that conference. And what we were saying there is, don't talk about the blue economy. If it's just another round of rape and pillage of the ocean, we shouldn't be doing a blue economy. But if it's a sustainable blue economy, it is the future of humanity. That's where our medicines are going to come from. That's where our food is going to come from. That's where our renewable energy is going to come from. But today, I gave up talking about sustainable blue economy because we had an event down at the Congress Center, which was the nature positive blue economy. And the more we went through that meeting, the more we realized that nature positive, it adds so much more to the blue economy than just saying sustainable. So thank you, all of you, for that inspiration last year. I remember standing up here 5 years ago, was it the first one, and complaining to you, Andre, that the ocean was not being mentioned, and it's a fact, and it still goes on today. I was at the luncheon by the governor of the Reserve Bank of India, and in that full hour and a half, nature and the ocean were not mentioned once in this whole presentation. So, we've still got a lot of work to do. But anyway, the mantra is no healthy ocean, no healthy planet without a healthy ocean, and the ocean's health is currently measurably in decline. And you only have to look at all the indicators to see that that is true. The one that I will single out for you, though, because it sort of echoes everything that Al has just been saying, is the plastic pollution. Because throw a cigarette butt, which is plastic in the filter, in the gutter out there, it's going to end up in the ocean eventually. The ocean is the great garbage dump for our chemicals and all the rest. But it's the plastic which is the worrying one, because that is breaking down on microfibers, and the phthalates which go into plastic to make it bendy and all the rest, which are what causes endocrine disruption and all those other health problems we're facing today in Homo sapiens. Those phthalates are being eaten by microbial life in the ocean. And if you want to know what that microbial life is, it's 90% of the biomass of the ocean is microbial. It is, we have it on film, it's eating the microplastics and the phthalates. And of course, it's coming back to us on our plates, but not tonight, Marco. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Eva.
Yep. Thanks so much. Next up, Simon Zadek, co-CEO of Nature Finance.
Brilliant. Thanks very much indeed. We all follow Al Gore for years, but not this closely. So I'll give it a go. So maybe we got the wrong kind of crisis. Think over the last 10, 12 years, the financial crisis, we managed to shift our thinking from we can't keep printing money because it will generate inflation to actually quantitative easing to the tune of tens of trillions of dollars. COVID, we know, in the period of fiscal austerity, universal income, obviously a terrible idea, except we spent in 18 months, $15 trillion, actually pivoting completely away from all conventional wisdom to a very different way of approaching COVID. I'm not really debating the merits of those two shifts, but I'm sort of wondering whether our crisis, the one we've been talking about all evening, is still somehow preventing us thinking about unconventional, disruptive change. And although what we've heard this evening are some amazing things that many different actors are doing, are we really stepping back and asking, are we taking the disruptive approaches that are needed? Now, I want to just give you two short examples. I can see Eva's eyes already sort of burying into my head, focused on a topic that I've certainly spent some time on, as have many other people in the room, which is finance. Today, we have 120 central banks and financial regulators talking fairly incessantly about climate and nature. But actually, what are they really doing? Very, very little. why aren't we pushing financial regulators towards actually an experience they've had before, which is a more directed credit that doesn't simply look at climate and nature as a financial stability problem, which is the way it's seen now, but actually pushes financial institutions to say, actually, you can't invest in those things anymore, but you can invest in those things. Completely unreasonable from any view of the policy independence of the central bank community, but actually possibly exactly what we should be pushing. And indeed, in some areas we are. G-Funds has adopted an approach where many financial institutions are committing to voluntary transition pathways to net zero and will move towards a nature positive approach. Why not a mandatory approach imposed by financial regulators across all financial institutions with penalties, not fines, because that will simply be an additional cost of doing business, as we know, but the removal of access to public procurement contracts and maybe many other possible approaches. Now, I'm just making the observation, not because I'm out to get financial institutions, but because maybe it's a moment where we do need to jettison a win-win view as a dominant way of thinking about how we make change and start thinking about some of the unconventional moves that are painful, that will have considerable resistance, but actually are part of the clue of stepping up above the incremental approaches that we've been taking to this agenda. Thank you.
Well, you almost got a kiss from Eva, which just a few seconds you were being kissed by Eva. But anyway, you missed the chance. Eva, go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Oh, so thank you. Moving on to Monica Medina. Many of you will know her from the US government, but now amazingly exciting new role for Monica, President and CEO of Wildlife Conservation Society. Over to you.
Thank you, and it's just humbling to be here in Davos and to have left my job sitting here with my former boss, Al Gore, which will date me. Makes me think about how important elections are in this year when so many countries will have elections around the world. I was in Nashville election night in 2000. My husband led his legal team fighting that election for, I don't know how many, 48 days, whatever. No, not even. Maybe it was about 40 days. Anyway, so elections matter. In my new job, so I'll transition, my new job, we are a very large field-based conservation organization, and I've had a chance to see the conservation stories, the positive stories that are happening all around the world, and our work is to hold on to as many of those big, important places that are intact as possible. But we also run the 4 zoos and the aquarium in New York City, where 3.5 million people come through our door every year. And we are embarking on a new journey to re-educate, to educate every single person who comes through. And when I left my job at the State Department, the Secretary of State said to me, I learned to love nature coming to the Central Park and the Bronx Zoo. So I will say to you, I am going to spend this year trying to build a movement for nature. Al Gore built a great movement around climate. I think we all have that responsibility, and if we can do that, I think we will make a difference in elections. We will build the political will that he talked about, and we can have that nature-positive future that we all care so much about. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica. Now, quick pass over to another great organization, another not really new, but almost new, great leader. It's my successor, in fact, Kirsten Schutt, WWF International Director General.
Thank you. Thanks, Marco. Let me start by saying really congratulations to the Nature Positive team. I know many of you are here, and it's incredible to see what a journey we've taken and how far we've come. It's also incredible to see so many great stories tonight. Great to see the steps that are being taken and the inspiration. And it's definitely inspired me. But it also leaves me still with an incredible sense of anxiety and urgency and more than anything, impatience. Having worked like many of my other colleagues in conservation for so many years, you know, you're talking about nature positive not being a slogan, and I fully agree, but neither is nature. nature are real places with real trees and coral reefs and species and people living in these places. And so all of this means nothing unless we see real impact in the places that we care about. Places like the Congo Basin, like the Amazon, like the Coral Triangle, Borneo, Mekong. I can talk about a long list of these places. And so you will see WWF focusing on these places, as we've done for 62 years. We'll drive system change with others, focusing on the key drivers of nature loss, food and finance. We'll push governments to deliver ambitious NBSAPs, making sure that we implement the GBF in the countries on the ground, and making sure that when we hit 2030, which is this magical year, where the GBF and the Paris Agreement and the SDGs are all three coming together, is not just a hollow year, but that we actually see a real impact on the ground. So thank you, Marco.
Thank you, Krista.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Next up, Mark Goff, CEO of Capitals Coalition.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Now you want to get on. Nature on the balance sheet, okay? So for many years, we've been producing natural capital accounts. They're mirror accounts, so they mirror what's been going on. All of that natural capital work now embedded completely in the TNFD. So if you're applying the TNFD, you're applying natural capital. But on Tuesday next week will be the first time there'll be a constructive obligation by a company where that will actually be put into the financial accounts. Nature is being put into the financial accounts. So I'll send you all the email. Okay, thanks, bye.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Now another leader, another great organization focusing on system change using data and science. Anika Gupta is the CEO and president of World Resource Institute. Ani.
Wow.
Clap.
Wow, yeah. What a night, huh? Marco, what a night. Yeah. I just want to say one thing. This slide's been there for all evening, and I just want you to focus on all the organizations on the slides, and a lot of my peer organizations are there. We are there. We've been part of this before it had a name, since 2019. I just want to say, I'm part of this breed of people. If you're an NGO, you love this, but you love nuance, So if you said something to me, Andre, I would say it back to you by saying, but in 6 other countries, it doesn't happen that way. But in this case, we didn't do that. We all actually came together under my friend Marco's leadership and actually came up with a narrative, a definition, and a measurement together. All these organizations, actually slightly different versions of it. And it mattered. It mattered very significantly in Montreal to have the outcome Marco talked about. And those ministers who negotiated came back to us and talked about how much it mattered. So this is a fantastic thing we have done together. I just want to say to my colleagues, the rest of you are not here, please join us. That's number one. And then number two, we have to deliver this. Even last year, Johan is not here anymore, we lost 10% of tropical forest. There's 7% tropical forest left in the world. So we have to now deliver it, help do all the things we want to do, because we have just the first step, because nature is not positive yet. And I hope more of you are here to work together in a radical way to make it positive. Thank you, Marco.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you.
Can you see me? Can you see me? I was hiding behind Tony.
This is the effect of Andre's wine, because this is Andre's wine and it's the best quality. But sometimes it goes straight to the head. Go ahead.
Yes, and did you notice that the plant-based meat, I've been vegetarian since I was 13. One exception when I was pregnant and I had a huge amount of biltong, which was really weird. Anyone else? Anyway, okay, next, moving right along, next up we have Ilona Sabo de Carvalho, co-founder and president of Igarape Institute. Sorry about the pronunciation, please stand up.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So thank you, Marco, thank you, Mrs. and Mr. Hoffman, for the invitation. So I grew up very luckily surrounded by the Atlantic forest in Brazil, of which only 20%, less than 20% stands. Actually, in a Swiss-founded town, first Swiss colony in the world called New Freiburg. Oh. So this year we're starting a project to protect parks that are being pressed by this tremendous urbanization in the coast of Brazil, that some of here are love the birds, so it's a amazing hotspots for birds. So I invite you to come. But our biggest program, and honestly my biggest urgency, is not to allow that the Amazon basin passes the 20% tipping point. And then we're almost there. So this is the biggest program my organization has today, which is not so sexy to say, but tackling environmental crime to start, trying to transform ecosystems that today are of illicit economies into nature-positive economies. This is easier to say than to be done, and that's why I think this initiative is so important. So we do this through really trying to understand what's happening, what is driving, working, of course, with several institutions from the subnational to the national, regional, global levels to strengthen the rule of law, because this is key for business, key for a sustainable economy. But we have to square together what to put in place, because there are 30 million people in the Amazon basin, and as the minister said, if we don't think about them, if we don't bring other things, the 20% tipping point will come, and will come fast. So what to do? So we're now thinking together with folks in this room as well, how to restore, how to scale up high integrity restoration, because it's not only preservation, conservation, but also restoration. How to build regenerative agriculture models that can scale as well, but also how to pay for ecosystem services that is very hard to put a price they can, because of the immense value that they have. So 2 invitations. After going to COP16, please come to COP30 in Belém and help us make it happen. And a more like a short-term one, we're organizing just back-to-back to the first G20 finance ministers gathering in São Paulo, a climate finance forum. We're co-convening this with 5 other organizations. So it's going to be first time Brazil puts ourselves out there in terms of transformational, like ecological transformation plans and so on. So if any of you want to engage with us and help us really take advantage of a G20 and a COP30, please tell me, come to São Paulo, come to Brazil, and join us for the Amazon, but also for all the other biomes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ilana.
If you have any doubt, Brazil is back. So that's fantastic, Ilona. We will... Wait, Eva, where are you going? I mean, you've been asking...
one more.
You've been asking... Oh, you have one more? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, it's
Apologies.
so unfair. Why don't you have more? Okay, last one. But last but not least, Lee, do you know? Sorry, did you know? No. Lee Howell, Executive Director of Villa Institute. Yes? Okay, do you want a minute?
Yeah. No, I'm good. Well, first, someone said they were like a Davos virgin or something. That was a very odd, because this is my 21st annual meeting in Rome. And
tell who you were before being what you are.
Well, I was going to say my first as a civilian, and probably the most, in that sense, that I'm not responsible for the annual meeting, and which I had done from 2009 to 2021. And I really feel very privileged as a person, but also as a parent, to be part of this community. And it's probably the most meaningful moment for me in these 21 years. I genuinely mean that, because of the work we do at the Villar Institute. And we're probably the youngest organization. But our mission is to accelerate the transition to a nature positive and a net zero economy. But there's one thing I want to highlight, too, because my chairman wouldn't forgive me. And the chair of the foundation is someone you're very familiar with, Julia Martin-Lefebvre, who is working with many of you. So the first, of course, is that, and Johan's not here, but we do have to find out and figure out, working together in an interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary way, how can we achieve prosperity within these planetary boundaries? I mean, that's very urgent. My part of it, though, is that whatever approach we take, the solution has to be an intergenerational solution, right? That's what we focus on. And the key is because we have a situation, and I speak here as a parent, with so many young people in a place of eco-anxiety. So how are we going to bring them to this place of eco-ambition, right? And so what we focus on is really very early on, working with schools and also education systems, is how do we introduce systems thinking? How do we actually change the curriculum itself to introduce much earlier this appreciation for nature, nature's solution? So that if they understand this, then we think, this is our hypothesis, is that with awareness about the system and what's going to happen and what we can do, you get agency. And that's what we're hoping to bring to the young people. Because at the end of the day, we can talk about 2050, but most of us won't be around. But we know we're counting on these young people. And after capital, we need talent. And so our invitation is, help us help the next generation, but also some of you I know will be with us in March for a VLAR Summit, where we'll talk about the more pressing issue of this prosperity within these planetary boundaries. So thank you for this opportunity, and it's a real delight after 20 years to be part of this community, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lee. So, Eva, I mean, what I was saying before is that you've been asking questions, but you are a leader in your own right, your organization, so active in a coalition. Please, tell us a little bit.
Well,
share
Marco,
a reflection from your side.
Yeah. Thank you. So I have
2 minutes like everybody else.
Yes. Yeah. I have 3 quick questions, 1 invitation, and then I'm going to say something really deep. Okay? So you ready? First question, who else has string from the meat in your teeth? Yeah? Thank you. That was an easy one. No, the second question is, no, that seriously was my first question. Second question is, who here has heard of a joint global mega business action campaign that is centered around companies having a strategy by 2030, and it's called It's Now for Nature? Yay! Well, it's a joint global campaign
The best.
centered around companies having a strategy for nature. So it's called It's Now for Nature. Check out nowfornature.org. Third question, do you want to know what the invitation is? Yes. The invitation is for all of you to contribute to a consultation we just launched here in Davos to help us prioritize which policy asks we, as Business for Nature Coalition, should be focused on ahead of COP16 and beyond. It's open till the 1st of March, so please, 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 we want to hear from all of you to help us prioritize what we should be asking governments to do to change the system. And now the deep bit, which is essentially, very quickly, that there is the mic, because it's going to be deep, so I need, the mic can't cut out in the middle. I'm serious, Nauko. There is no nature positive, there is no net zero, and there's no equitable world without a foundation of peace. I have been so upset, and I know many, many of you are so hurt by the suffering, the conflict in the world, and I have been really upset by posts on LinkedIn that are so polarizing, that are not constructive. And if people in our network are sharing messages that essentially share hatred and polarizing opinions and think that's going to help, well, think again, because it's not going to help. I feel that all of us have the responsibility, who are not directly involved in a conflict, to hold on to peace, because those conflicts, when they're over, will need to come to us. And if we are divided, there is no way we will reach what is the most important mission for humanity. Thank you.
Talking about peace with nature, peace with people is the same part, two sides of the same coin. Andre, shall you come here so we close the dances and we open the bar? In that order, possibly, yes. Look, I just want to say one thing. Annie, thank you for the segue. This is a Nature Positive initiative. We are launching also a much broader and inclusive Nature Positive forum to engage, to input, to learn, to share, to influence, through which we will consult. Can you move the next slide? And please look at the site, look at the structure of the forum, and join it. I hope this will increase dramatically the diversity, the inclusiveness, and also the inputs and the richness of our work. But I hope you have been inspired by the many, many top-level leaders, thought leaders that actually are already part of the initiative. Having said that, from my side, thank you very much. Apologies, I told you it was an expensive dinner, but I hope you enjoyed and were inspired by the excellent contribution that I found were all over the program of the evening. Thank you so much, everybody. And Andre, your last words.
Well, thank you, Marco, for giving me the first and last word. I have 3 things to tell you. The first thing is, bravo. You're the best audience I've ever seen. It's been absolutely non-stop. For those of you who do not have the adrenaline flow of talking, I can tell you, you must be so bored. You must be asleep. You must be... Anyway, thank you for standing with us. That's number one. Number two, I'd like to remind you, why are we doing this? We are not doing this just because we like nature and because nature looks beautiful. We're doing that for people. Because the current system does not help humanity. We are failing humanity. We're creating discrepancies, we're creating inequalities on a scale that is unacceptable. If we really want to get to a nature-positive world, we are going to have to rebalance the way we distribute the incomes of society. So that would be my second message. And my third message would be to say we need to understand what being successful means. Being successful does not mean to have a microphone at the end of a dinner when you don't know what to say. Being successful does not mean having a bigger bank account. Being successful means being happy. You know, try. Do what you need to be happy. And don't pretend to be somebody you're not. Just live in balance with your values. If you think that something needs to be done, it probably needs to be done. Don't do it because you think that other people think you think it should be done. Okay? Anyway, thank you very much. And the bar is open, of course. And the bar is open, of course.